Welcome to Journey to June. I'm your host, Wendy Pasilico, the founder of Live Your June, and I'm here sharing the stories, the journeys of Soulstigators that I have come across in my life. And one today is a very close friend of mine, Steve Porpora. He has been I'm learning more about his journey as I've met him in the last, 15 years. He was on the stock market, on the floor. He's a writer. He's passionate about cars. He sketches. He's retired, still having a business in Vermont, a real estate business. How many grandkids?
14 among all three families.
14 grandkids. So welcome, Steve Porpora, to Journey to June. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm going to move over here like this.
Nice
So I thought it'd be cool to have Steve come in, not only to share your passions and the journey that you've lived, but I just find it fascinating how you've lived your life through the transitions, whether chosen or not. So we're going to dive into that a little bit, but tell me where you're at right now, what you're up to besides the new car you just pulled into your driveway yesterday. So give me a little synopsis, and yeah.
Actually, it's funny. I commented the other day to a friend of mine. I don't think I've been happier in my life than I am right now. And they always say that your later years, I'm 77, that your aging years are the golden years. And I always laughed. I went, who's kidding who? The golden years, you're sick, you're hurt, you have bad knees, you have bad shoulders. But suddenly I find myself in a position here at 77 and I'm really happy.
Yeah.
And I love where I live. As I told you, this is a beautiful place to live. I love having you guys and your mom as my neighbors. It's a wonderful area. I'm busy in my life. I'm running my little real estate business, but I also do my sketching and I do writing. I wrote for the Huntington Bay magazine for many years now. I haven't done it for a while, but I love doing all these things. And I love having my own time. I love making my own schedule. And I'm really happy right now.
You are. He's always puttering. He's always puttering in something. See if he has a garage. We'll visit it and later we could show the viewers. But you got your hands in something always. You're not sitting around doing nothing as a retiree. Let's go into, because you talked yesterday, since we've reconnected in the last week, about growing up in Islip and Fire Island. Were you from a big family? Did you what was your upbringing like?
No, I was in a very small family, just my sister. I had one sister. We grew up in Islip on the water on Great South Bay. I write about it in my book. It was a wonderful childhood. I was a clammer. I always had from the time I was 14, I had my own little skiff. My parents bought me the skiff. I had to pay for the gas. And I would clam.
What's a skiff?
A skiff is a little outboard boat. A little boat.
Got it.
Like a Boston whaler.
So you were a boater.
Yeah. So I grew up on boats. My dad had a boat. We had a club. He started a club on Fire Island in between Kismet and Saltaire. We spent every weekend over there on the boat. And then gradually I started getting jobs running boats because that's what he taught me to do. And one summer I was a 3-day-a-week deck boy on one of the ferries, the Fire Island Belle, which I have a picture of in the hallway. And then after that, I got a job working as a skipper on a guy's yacht. And I did that for 3 summers. And then I met a guy from Wall Street who took me down to Wall Street. And at 16, I started commuting on the Long Island Railroad in the summertime and the subway to Wall Street. And I worked on Wall Street for the time I was 16 on, all through summers in college. And then when I graduated college, I started full time. But growing up in Islip was a wonderful thing. And I loved clamming. I used to I would go out and go clamming in the morning, come into Whitecap Seafood, which still exists. You can go down there in Islip and have a 5-pound lobster sitting on the dock. they cook it for you. It's a wonderful place on paper plates. And I used to come in with my clams, and I scalloped and clammed. I did a little bit of oystering, but not a lot. And I would come in and sell my clams and oysters. I'd pull my Bossa whaler into the dock and sell it, and they would pay me cash. They would just peel off the cash. So I always had, from the time I was 14, lots of cash in my pocket.
So let me ask you this. So you're a worker. Like I hear, you're always learning and working.
Yeah, I always worked. I always worked with my dad. When I was little, he was a house painter. He would take me on a job with me, and he would teach me. He was a very good teacher. He would teach me to paint. I'm a very good painter.
So do you think people are wired to be go-getters, or do you think that was a learned or expected of you from your father, or where did that come about for you at 14 to be so driven?
Good question. My mother was extremely ambitious. She was a very ambitious. She went to Catherine Gibbs, became very good at secretarial things. Like she could write, take notes like the wind, and she could spell any word anywhere. When I used to do my Christmas cards, I used to call her up when she was 85 years old and ask her how to spell some obscure word, and she would spell it. So she was very bright, and she was very ambitious, which actually worked against her, because back in those days, they didn't want women to be ambitious. So she took some heavy lumps in her life. But so where did I get my drive from? She was very ambitious. My father was not. He was happy just making a living as a painter and having a family and having a boat. So that's a good question. I was ambitious, and I always wanted to have money in my pocket. I always wanted to be doing something. It probably came from my mother.
So when you think of, I want you to think in your space of where you grew up, but also when you think of the time we're in now with some kids that are, my daughter's 11, she's sitting over there. What would you wish you saw out of that young age, currently, knowing how you operated at your age?
Right. That's a great question. And I have grandchildren exactly Josie's age, many of them. And what I wish for them is that they could put down their media and take their bike and go out and ride their bikes and play with their friends outside in their neighborhoods, which I guess a lot of kids don't do anymore, which we always did. We go out, in the summertime, we go out in the early morning and say to my mother, "See you later." I go out and I work for a couple hours clamming. Then I came back and pick up my friends, go water skiing, and we go over to Fire Island, go to the beach, and then I come home at 6 for dinner. And that was just a wonderful way. The interaction, doing things, and water skiing, sailing, going to the ocean with friends, and the interaction, I think, was so important. The little I know of the current generation is they're married to their phones. And when my son Devon was 8, we sent him to a camp in Durango, Colorado, called Colvig Silver Camp. And he went there for 6 summers in a row. And
what was it called again?
Colvig Silver Camp.
Okay.
It's up at 10,000 feet outside of Durango. And it starts off, the kids spend the days in the camp. They have tree houses that they stay in. And then as they get older, they go out on hikes. Sometimes for a 2-day hike, 5-day hike, 7-day hike, or more. And they climb 14,000 foot peaks. But the thing is, today, now my 2 grandchildren, my son's 2 children, both go to Colvig Silver Camp. And when they go there, there is no social media. They have to leave their cell phones. They have to leave their iPads. They take nothing with them. And they go there and they spend a month and a half with no social media. And they love it.
It is beautiful. Josie just also went to camp only for 2 weeks, but we also just came from Telluride. And there's something about being in nature.
Yeah.
You know, it's what you're saying. It's like turn off the phone, go on your bikes, connect to nature friends, da 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 da. And I do, there's a book out there, if you're listening, any of the listeners, it's called The Anxiety Generation. And it talks about exactly this, that we're missing the play. And it's part of their brain development.
Yeah.
And when we're take that away, it's really screwing up how their brain is developing. Beyond the social media, it's bigger than that.
Right.
So we need to come back to the play. So I love that. And I hear that in like your childhood, how much you had that. I think of my dad like that.
Yeah.
We were like that. You know, I used to be gone all day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it, and it's funny, Josie's home this summer and a little bit, like I could see she wants to, it's also our hat. We're all in the cars all the time. It's just, we used to be on bikes, boats, you know? Cool. What's the coolest memory from your childhood? Like one of, like that pops up in your mind that like, that's the coolest either memory, challenge, like that comes to mind that goes, I really like that, I don't want to say that shaped you, but it made you tougher.
Yeah, it was interesting. My father used to call it a real job, and that's working for a stranger. And my first real job was, I always clammed and worked with him, and I always made money doing things. But my first real job was when I worked on ferries, but that was only a couple of days a week. First real job, I can't remember how old I was when I got a job running this yacht for this man in the next town. He was in Bayshore. And I was so apprehensive. I remember thinking, I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if I'm going to be good at it. I don't know if he's going to be a nice guy. And my father said, relax. This will pass. You will go there and you'll do that job. And then after a few weeks or maybe a month, you'll go, I got this. Mm-hmm. And I remember I was so apprehensive the first day I went to the job. His name was Phil DiPaolo. He made parachute cloth, and very interesting man. And he was from Italy. And I went there and he was so kind. And he said, relax, you look like you're nervous. This is an easy job. All I want you to do is I want you to take care of the swimming pool. I want you to enter. He had a daughter my age. I want you to make sure my daughter's sailboat is ready for her to sail. And I want you to keep my yacht clean. And when I come home on weekends, I want you to take me over to Fire Island. This is the best job in the world. Relax. And I remember after the first couple of days, I went, you know, I got this. Mm. And I remember that so many times in my life. When I started doing TV work on the floor of the exchange for CNBC, my first time, I was going to be on camera on national TV. And they were going to interview me about the market. And I was so scared. I was so nervous. Mm. And I remember thinking back to that event that my father said, this will pass. You're going to get this. Mm. Just get through the first one, relax, try to relax. Mm. And that's what I did there too. And
I think it's important to, so you did, whatever age that was that you went with the Italian, what was he, like a?
He was a manufacturer.
Manufacturer.
He had the contract for making all the parachute cloth for the U.S. government.
That's amazing. But to learn, like that trigger of like, I did that at a young age.
Yeah.
And when the TV opportunity or stock market, I think sometimes we forget that we actually have gone through something. And that's why it's important, even when I think of raising my kid or your grandkids, to put themselves out there. Like, social media is not putting yourself out there.
Absolutely.
You know, and like when you do that, it's like giving you an example. So when you're on TV for the first time, you're frozen, but you're like, have the mindset that you can actually do it.
You can do this.
So freaking cool.
Yeah.
I love it. How, tell me a little about the stock market, because I have like this, I always find it interesting because I've never been in that field, or my family's never been in that field. You were in there at 16.
Yeah.
And then you just kept going at it. How long were you in the stock market? You were down on the floor for a while.
Well, when I started as a kid, I was up in an office. And I remember the guy who brought me to Wall Street, his picture is right up there on the wall. I met him on Fire Island, believe it or not. And he said to my parents, I want to take him to Wall Street. He was a diamond trader. So 2 days a week, he used to give me a package. And he said, take this package over to D. Natale Jewelers. It's a big jeweler in Lower Manhattan on Broadway called D. Natale. Peter D. Natale, never forget it. And he used to, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I would run these packages. I had no idea what was. I was a 16-year-old kid. I didn't know what was in the package. The package was filled with diamonds, with uncut diamonds that this Desmond McCarthy, my boss, traded. And he would take me there, and I'd go in and I'd deliver him. Mr. Dean Halley said, "Oh, Steve, it's so nice to meet you. You'll be here this summer. Thank you so much." And at the end of the summer, my boss said, I was getting ready to go back to school, high school. And my boss said, "Mr. Dean Natale wants to have you for lunch because he's enjoyed working with you this summer." And so I went in and I sat down with him, and he said, "It's been fun working with you, and you bring these packages every day to me." He said, "But I have one question I've been dying to ask you." And I went, "What that?" And he went, "Where do you keep your gun?" And I went, "Gun?" I was just like this. I was a clamor. I didn't have a gun, and I didn't realize it. And he started laughing, and he went, "Do you know what you've been bringing me every day?" I went, "I don't have a clue." Because to me, what I did is I had a little routine. I would go to drop off the diamonds. I didn't know they were diamonds. Drop off the package. I'd go to the automat and get lunch, and then I would go to the New York Stock Exchange Visitors Gallery. I don't know if you've ever done that, but the New York Stock Exchange has a visitors gallery. I used to go up there every day and look down on the floor, see these guys running around there. Oh my God. Every day I went out for lunch to run diamonds, 2 days a week, I would go there. And little did I know that 15 years later I would spend the rest of my life down on that floor.
Okay.
So
you had no inkling, like, I want to be down there on that floor? Or was it like you were dreaming, like it made you excited? Like,
yes, I was excited, but I never thought I would have. Never.
Why?
Just because, like, you can't go to college to learn how to, it's no longer there, but when the New York Stock Exchange was operating, you can't go to college to learn how to be a floor trader. You can't go to trade school to learn how to be a floor trader. You have to work your way in, usually through a clerk's job or a runner, and then they pick you up. If you're bright, you become a clerk, and then after clerk, you get a seat. So it's not like a job that you just go, "Oh, I'm going to go to college to become a doctor," or "I'm going to become a dentist," or something like that. It's not like that. It's an uneven path of basically luck. I got to the floor by luck. I ended up going to California, and then one day my boss walked in and said, "I have a seat open on the New York Stock Exchange in New York. You want it?" I went, "Yeah." That's how I ended up on the floor.
Yeah, but don't you think? We're jumping around a little bit,
I know.
But it's okay. No, not in a bad way. But like, because we don't know where you really went to college, but like that little thing of you seeing that every day. There's a reason you were drawn to it.
Yeah.
You're right. You were curious or something. Who knows? Do you think the guy said, "Oh, here's this"? Yes, it was a luck. Here's a seat. Do you think? Why do you think he chose you?
Oh, because there are two reasons why he chose me. Because at the time I was a trader on the desk in Los Angeles. He worked with me. After a while, famous investor, he would give me his orders to execute, and I would execute them. And I worked with the people on the floor of the exchange, and they liked me. I started having a relationship with most Los Angelinos. Don't want to know anything about New Yorkers. They hate New Yorkers. But I was actually a New Yorker. And I was out there, and I bonded with these guys on the floor of the exchange. And when our senior partner left to go to Goldman Sachs, he left our firm, become the floor broker for Goldman Sachs. He went to my boss in Los Angeles and said, "I'm leaving. I'm going to resign. But what do you want me to do? Do you want me to hire somebody down here?" And the chairman of our firm said, "I'd rather pick the person." And he said, "Okay, you have a person on your trading desk, Steve Porpora, who I think would be great down here."
So they had you in mind because you were a certain personality.
Yeah, because I got along with them. We got along. I was nice to people, and it's a people business.
It is life is a people business.
I guess that's true.
For sure.
So that's how I ended up on the floor.
So what did you love about? What did you love? What you didn't love about being on the stock market? Like
on the floor of the exchange, you mean?
Yeah, I know.
It was just. I write about it in my book. It was just an exciting and fabulous way to make a living. You're on your feet. As a broker, you walk an average of 15 to 17 miles a day on your feet. I remember when I first went to the floor, there's a seat on the floor of the exchange. A membership is called a seat, but there are no seats on the floor of the exchange. There's no place to sit down on the floor of the exchange. So anyone who works on the floor, whether you're a clerk or a runner or a broker or a specialist, you're on your feet from 9 to 4 every day. And just, you don't think about it, but I remember when I first started going to the floor, I was exhausted by 1 o'clock. So there's a physical component. As a floor broker, you're moving around, you're interacting with people, you're matching wits with people, you're bantering with people, you're trying to work the best trade for your customer. It was exciting. There were interesting people down there. There was a lot of money made on the floor of the exchange. Specialists, you met some fabulously interesting people. And it didn't matter that there was no, I don't even want to use the word racism, because there was no concept, whether you were Italian or Jewish or black or Asian, nobody cared. All you had, the thing was on the floor of the exchange, could you take the heat? Because there was big pressure.
Stress.
Big pressure and big stress. And
some people can't.
Some people can't.
Bold.
But if you could do the job, that's why you'd walk. The clerk in IBM was a black kid. I'm talking about back in the 70s. And he was like the best clerk on the floor of the exchange. And people would go, oh my God, you have blacks on the floor. What do you mean? Of course there are. There were brokers who were black. There were Asians. There were Hispanics. It was just a wonderful place. There was only one thing that mattered. And you didn't have to have a college education. I did have a college, but a lot of the most successful guys on the floor of the exchange started off as runners. And people saw that they were bright and personable and go get them. And let's hire that guy. So it was an interesting place to work. Very exciting.
How long were you on the floor?
33 years.
And then you retired off the floor?
I retired when the exchange disappeared. In 2008, the exchange went electronic.
Yeah.
And today, you see pictures of people on the floor of the exchange on CNBC. But there's really nothing going on. It's a TV studio now.
Yeah.
So you turn on CNBC.
And you retired just because you were done, or you retired because of the shift and how it was operating?
Yeah, shifting. I didn't want to trade electronically. We got these handheld computers. They would teach us how to do it, and I went, I'm not interested. Because basically you put the order in the computer does it. I wasn't interested in doing that.
Yeah.
And also Barbara was, at that point, my wife was...
Right.
She was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2006, and by 2008 she was starting to deteriorate. Okay. And I knew I wanted to devote time to her, and she needed 24/7 care. Yeah. And I wanted to do it as long as I could, which I was able to do for a number of years. So it was a combination of things. But the main reason I retired is the exchange just ceased to exist as I knew it. It was just such an incredibly vibrant and interesting place. So I just thought it was the right time to retire. And now looking back on it, and then I immediately started writing op-eds for a financial paper called the Investor's Business Daily. Fabulous financial paper. And I started writing op-eds and submitting them, and they started printing them.
Wow. Very cool. Who was the most interesting person you met on the floor?
On the floor of the exchange?
There were probably a ton, but...
There were a ton of people. The most interesting guy I think I met is a guy named Arthur Cashin. I don't know if you've ever heard about him. He's on TV all the time. He worked for a firm called Payne Weber. He was about 10 years older than me. A member of Mensa. Fabulously brilliant guy. A Knight of Malta, if you know what that is, the Catholic organization that works with the Pope. And he was just a brilliant man, a great writer, and he influenced me a lot. He influenced me to, actually the reason I started writing op-eds was because of him. Because I used to send him my Christmas card that you've seen, I write every year. I started writing in '77, so by 2008 I was I've written it for 25 years, almost 30 years. So he used to get my card all the time, and he said to me the day I retired, he said, "You need to write. You're a good writer. I read every year I read when you're writing your Christmas card. You need to write." And he introduced me to the publisher of Investor's Business Daily, and I started writing for them.
Wow.
And I loved that. And I used to he was very politically connected, the owner of this paper. It's now owned by News Corp and Dow Jones. Still in existence. I don't write for them anymore, but he wanted me to write op-eds on political things, which I wasn't crazy about. I would rather I like to write, my publisher used to call them green pieces. I like to write about people, people in the marketplace, and great traders that I had met through the years. I used to write those things. And they would always publish them, but the publisher of this paper was very politically. I want some more political stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Now you're a very people person. Was it hard to leave the industry? I mean, obviously, we've gone through a chapter in his life that he also was married to Judi, your first wife.
Right.
Let's just go there because this is part of the book I want to share. I'm going to pull this book out. He wrote a book. Also with all his writing. It's The Unlikeliest Olympian. But you married Judi young.
Yes. We married right out of college. I met her. I went to the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania.
Okay.
She went to Beaver College.
Where's Beaver College?
It doesn't exist anymore for obvious reasons. They changed the name. But it's in Glenside, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Near Philadelphia. Obviously, University of Pennsylvania, Wharton is in Philadelphia. And I had a girlfriend who went to Beaver, and she invited me to go out to a mixer along with some of my fraternity brothers. We did that, and Judi was her lab partner. I met her, and we just clicked. And we dated all through college, and we got married in the first year. She was a year younger than me, so we got married I graduated in 69, she graduated in 70, we got married in 71.
And then you had your two kids right away?
Kinda? Actually, no, we didn't. We got married in 71. We didn't have my son Devon until 76. We were in Los Angeles. I took the job in LA.
Oh, you were in California, then moved back.
We were in California for 5 years. I took a job. After my father died, I wanted to get out of New York. And I made it known to the firm. They offered me a job in Los Angeles and Seattle. And actually, I took Seattle, but then we merged. They didn't need me, so I went to LA. But we had our first child in 76. We honestly never really thought about having children. Never. It never crossed my mind. And then one day, Judi came home and she said, I had a little medical problem. She was on the pill. And she said, I had an allergic reaction to the pill, and I have to be off the pill for 6 months.
Yeah.
So she said, what do you want to do? And I went, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. If you get pregnant, you get pregnant. Well, of course, she got pregnant the first month. And that's how we had children. And we had our first child. And then we didn't have our second one until 6 years later. We had Mairin. And by that time, we were back in New York.
So I've known Steve for a while. And I hear you talk about your Devon and Mairin and your grandkids, and but I had never heard of his story, this book that you wrote. When did you write this, by the way? This Unlikeliest Olympian.
Actually, I started writing it when I retired in 2008. I was writing it until I was doing op-eds. I was taking care of Barbara. I started writing the book. I always thought about writing about this story. One of my children, Judi, died in 2000, so in 2008, I was 8 years after she died, and I wanted my daughter was very young, I wanted my son and my daughter to remember what their mother did for them in their lives. Because my son Devon, he was very sick. He doesn't remember anything before third grade. So he doesn't remember the sacrifices when he was sick, what his mother did for him. I want our kids to know that. And Mairin was too young. Mairin was only born in 82. So she was very young.
And this, I so value that. You taking the time to to have them understand and the world to share the story, because I think this is what Live Your June is all about. It's like not leaving that story unheard.
Yeah.
You know, not leaving it just to chance, hopefully to remember it. So it's so cool. It makes me want to write my book, you know, remember, because it is important for that generation to learn so that grandkids can learn.
Yeah.
So tell us what you experienced, because obviously Judi was amazing from what you shared, and she passed early, suddenly. But what was it that Devon went through? Like, explain what this book is about, kind of.
Right, trying to boil it down. When he was 6 years old, he had a grand mal seizure. I was in the city working. It happened in the afternoon. Judi called me up and said, I was out to dinner with clients. She said, you have to come home, meet me at the hospital. Devon's had a seizure. We get to the hospital. They couldn't stop the seizure. It was a status grand mal seizure, very unusual. And the doctors came out and said, we've tried everything to stop your son's seizure. We can't. What we have to do is we have to stop his heart. We have to give him a lethal dose of a drug, phenobarb, and we have to basically kill him, and then we'll revive him. And we need you to sign the permission. So we're sitting there in the emergency room, and he gave me this thing to sign, and so I immediately signed it, handed it to Judi, and she dropped it on the floor. She said, I'm not going to sign it. You're asking me to sign a letter for these people to kill our son. He's not really killing, they're trying to save our son. I finally talked to her, she signed it. They ended up doing the procedure. He survived. He was in a coma for 6 days afterwards. And one day he came to, and we realized after some series of testing that we were told he was permanently brain damaged and he would never be able to be. I'll never forget the neurologist at New York Presbyterian in the city they sent us to, telling us, you will never be able to educate your son normally again. And I remember we were sitting there and we were just frozen. And I remember walking out of his office, because Devon was, at that point he was on phenobarb. He was like a junkie because it's a terribly debilitating drug, anti-seizure drug. The doctors gave it to him because they told us he will not survive another seizure. So he was like a junkie. And
so they said keeping him alive, but not letting him have a seizure, but he really was just not living, right? I mean, he was brain dead, they were telling you.
Well, he wasn't brain dead. He was conscious and moving around, but he was very disruptive. You know, we managed to get the schools to mainstream of the school.
Go back, you shared something when the doctor told you that.
Yeah.
What did your wife say?
Yeah.
That's the important thing.
I told you that. So we're in his office at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital, and I said, what do we do now? And he said, take him to a testing psychologist. I'll give you the names of some, and they will give him a baseline. And from that baseline, you'll be able to pick out a special school to send him to for disabled children. So it was like we were speechless. And I remember we walked out of his office, he closed the door, and Judi looked at me and she turned around, she pointed her finger at the doctor, and she said, he was gone by that point. And she said to me, that's not going to happen. In other words, she wasn't going to allow our son, she was going to give up and just say, okay, fine, he's brain damaged permanently and he's not going to become a normal student. She wasn't going to let that happen. She was going to do something herself. And she did. She started tutoring him every night. And little by little, he started getting better and better, getting more. He was better behaved at school. The teachers were willing to tolerate him, which they weren't originally. And his grade level, he was actually learning, which the doctor told us he wouldn't be able to do. But it's because of her. Every night we had dinner, and every night she would take 7 days a week, 12 months a year. And she would take him in the living room and sit down, and she would tutor him in whatever they did in school that day. Reading, writing, arithmetic, geometry, whatever it was. Because she was a teacher. She was a teacher by trade.
Yeah.
She was a science teacher. And she rescued him, and we ended up in third grade finding out, a person came forward and told us he had hit his head at a birthday party 4 years prior.
Well, let's wake up like, go into that space, because you're running over that moment in time, because you shared it very special the other day. Is you're at a teacher meeting or like a parent conference in school, and they say,
right, back to school night.
Back to school.
In my book, there's a chapter called the Back to School Night Gift.
Okay, yeah.
So here we are, back to school night, and third grade, he was still sort of disruptive, always getting in trouble, and an okay student. He was starting to come back. She was tutoring back. At the end of the presentation by the teacher, all the parents were in the room. She said, Stephen, she knew my wife because Judi was always active in school. President of the Parents' Council, school board, she was on everything. So teacher, I'll never forget, her name was Elsie Sealander.
That's my grandmother's name, Elsie.
Oh, that's an unusual name. So Elsie said, Judi and Steve, would you wait until the end? I want to speak to you. So I remember sitting there thinking, oh boy, what did Devon do now? So all the people leave, and we walk out to the end, to the door of their room, and she's standing there. She'll be greeting all the parents. And we said, you want to speak to us? She says, actually, there's someone in the principal's office who wants to speak to you. And I remember Judi knew her well. Judi grabbed her and going, Elsie, you gotta, what are we walking into? She said, I'm not at liberty to tell you. She said, can't remember how she said it, but she basically said, there's someone's going to speak to you that's going to shock you. And now we have no idea what's going to happen. But we walk into the principal's office, and there's a lady sitting there who introduces herself as a social worker. The principal leaves the room, and this woman sits down with us, and she says, a friend of yours has come forward. We all know about the struggles that you've had with your son and with Devon and his medication. And she said, a friend of yours has come forward who has told us she knows why your son had that seizure 4 years ago, on that Thursday night, 4 years ago. And she then proceeded to tell us that the woman wasn't there. This was a social worker who worked at the high school, I guess. And she said, the woman said your son was at her son's birthday party on a Sunday night prior to the seizure. Boys being boys, somebody pushed him, he fell down, hit his head on the fireplace hearth, and was knocked out. She said she held him in her arms for he came to in 10 seconds, 20 seconds, whatever it was. He cried for a little while, and then she let him go, and he was running around. By the end of the party, he was running around playing with the kids. And she said, so I said to the social worker, why didn't she tell us that night? And she said, the social worker said, well, because, when you came to pick Devon up, all the kids were running around. It was crazy. Kids running around kids stoked up on sugar from the birthday cake or whatever. And she forgot to tell you. And then Thursday night, when she heard, her son was in Devon's class, so everybody knew what happened to Devon in reference to the hospital. Mm-hmm. And she said Thursday night when he had that seizure, she chose not to come forward because she was afraid she would get sued. Mm. I remember Judi sitting there saying, and I keep her identity secret in this book. I don't mention her name. We knew her. She was a friend of ours. Her son was in our class. Lived in Cold Spring Harbor, like half a mile from us. And so I said to her, why didn't she tell us? She said she was afraid of being sued. I remember Judi saying that she knows us. She knows we're not that kind of people that we would sue her. So we were like stunned at this whole thing. And for me, that was the piece of the puzzle that we need, because I wanted him off those drugs that Fina Barbie was on. Mm-hmm. I kept saying to his doctor, can't we try a different drug? Can't we try a different drug? And his doctors kept saying, we can't take the chance of him having another seizure because he won't survive a second seizure. He will not survive another seizure like he had. We don't know what caused it, so we have to stop it with this. So now I knew I could go to his doctor and go, now we know what caused it. Can we get him off? Mm-hmm. So we're sitting there in the room with this woman and with the social worker, and she gave us a couple of minutes together. Judi and I talked about it. And then she came back in the room, and she said, what do you want me to tell the woman? And we thought about it for a minute, and I went, tell her thank you. Mm. Tell her thank you. We would have liked that she told us 4 years ago. We could have saved Devon all of this that he's gone through. But by the same token, we realized the courage that it took for her to come forward 4 years later and tell us this. She didn't have to do it. She had gotten away clean on this deal. No reason for her to have come forward, but she did. And I write about it in my book. And we were able to get Devon off the phenobarb, and it was like somebody flipped a light switch. And instead of being a disabled kid, unable to be educated, he went to Yale University.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. What did you learn from all that? Like, one, your wife, Judi, saying there's no way.
Right.
No way he's going to go to this other school. I'm going to find a way.
Yeah. That's what
And
she
then
said.
I would say, like, that moment of Judi, like, how do you describe Judi? Like, just that's obviously a definition of how she operated. Like, how do you describe Judi? In that moment, but in life, like how she operated.
She was very determined. She was very unemotional. I'm going to do this. This is what we're going to do. She was very unemotional. She was very focused. Like after Devon was better, and once he got into high school, I remember the night I think he was in 9th grade. We were having dinner, and she was still tutoring him every night. And I remember him looking across the dinner table. He went, "Mom, we're good now. You don't need to tutor me." Oh my God, she was crushed. Here it was, every night after dinner they would go in there. And she got so upset. And I remember she went in the bedroom, she was, the only time I ever saw her that upset. And I walked in there and I said, "What's going on? How do you feel?" And she said, "He's right." She said, "He doesn't need me. He's gone beyond what I could teach him. But I love doing it, and I hate to see it stop." So she was very focused, and after that she started tutoring random kids in the community. Never take any money for it. So at her funeral, these guys came up to me, and this one kid came up to who was going to the University of Michigan. He's a football player, had his uniform on, and he came up to me because Judi died in September, like the first week of college into school. She died September 9th, and her funeral was probably the 12th to the 13th. It's filled up St. Patrick's Church. It was filled. And so we're in the receiving line. This kid came up to me. Man, he was a big kid. He was like 6'5". I never saw him in my life. And he said, I forget his name. And he said, "I was a student at Cold Spring Harbor High School, and I got to 8th grade and I couldn't pass the Regents. Couldn't pass the math Regents. And somebody told my mom about your wife, and she tutored me for 6 months. And I passed the Regents." And he said to me, "If it wasn't for your wife, I would have never gone to college. And now I have a full scholarship to the University of Michigan to play football." And there were a lot of kids like that. She tutored all these kids, never took any money. I met so many of them in the years after she passed away. And the parents would come up to me and say, "Your wife was amazing." And I didn't know any of this because I was at work, and she would tutor these kids after school. Never take any money.
Yeah. I mean, even when you say that was the first time she had emotion from like, "Oh, my job is done."
Right.
It reminds me
That was in the car, yeah.
But it also reminds me of the time when she dropped off your daughter.
Yeah, at college.
It's similar.
Yeah.
It's like, my job is done.
Yeah. And she died 6 days later.
It's crazy. I mean, it makes me, if you're listening, the importance of sharing how someone has made you feel or what someone has done, like for you to hear that. I wish she had heard it,
Yeah.
I just think I do that when we just did a gratitude month with some of the kids, people I coach. I mean, they're moms, entrepreneurs, tennis player, but just like taking time to say thank you or to say what you did, because Judi probably never heard that.
Yeah.
It's cool that you got to hear it, but I wish we would do it more often.
Yeah.
What did you get out of writing this book? And maybe how did the kids take it?
It's a good question. I got a lot of satisfaction out of writing it because it was a story I wanted to tell. I was able to include, every chapter is illustrated with one of these sketches that you see around here. So I felt good about that. You know, I always wanted to make sure I left something behind whenever our lives end, whenever that is. I want to make sure that I left a footprint, this artwork, the book, whatever. And the book represented that to me, that here I'm leaving this behind to whoever. I don't know who wants to read it, if anybody wants to read it, but I want to leave this behind. So that gave me a lot of satisfaction. And it was a good thing because it was, I was married to Barbara, and Barbara was ill with Alzheimer's, and it was a steady progression. And I started getting help in the house, and the minute I got help in the house, I had a rule for myself. I'm getting out of the house for my own mental ability, and I would go to the library, and I'd take my computer and I'd write the book. So it was perfect timing. You know, I had retired, I had some time to take care of Barbara, needed to get a break from a time. Because a lot of my friends whose spouses or family members end up with dementia and they're staying home. It's very difficult. Journey. And you got to get out. You got to make sure you take care of yourself. Also, you want to take care of that person. You got to take care of yourself. So for me, that gave me this break. I went to Cold Spring Harbor Library, got a seat overlooking the harbor, and I would sit there and I just was immersed in this story.
Wow.
And then I had an editor, and I would write a chapter and then go have it edited, meet with my editor, change a few things, and then go right to that. So it was perfect timing for me.
It gave you like purpose in the midst of a hard moment.
Yeah, I think that I think everyone has a book in them. I think everybody has a book. Maybe successful, commercially successful, or maybe not. Doesn't matter. You got a book in you. So it's important for me to know my kids know this story. And our whole family, of course, has it. I gave it to everybody in the family. So I've gotten a lot of satisfaction out of having done that.
When you, like we've jumped from Judi passing early on, which was obviously shock to your family.
Right, she would never sick a day in her life. She died next to me at 5 a.m. I heard this noise. I went, that doesn't sound good. She had an aortic aneurysm, which oddly enough, I ended up having. I just had it operated on 6 months ago, open heart surgery. But we didn't know she had it. I knew I had it.
Yeah.
We didn't know she had it. And
you guys were married how long?
We got married in 1971. She died in 2000.
2000.
So what? 29 years, right?
Yeah. So then, like I'm talking about transitions in life, like I think of my dad dying, 2003, similar. My mom was 60,
totally
he was 63, just dropped dead.
Yeah.
We knew he had some stuff for a long time, but the transition of like, how do you go forward? When you had your life, you had your job, your kids were going to college. Same with it's very similar actually at the timing.
Yeah.
Where my dad's last kid was in college. Your Mairin had just gone to college. How do you, if you talk to the listeners, like how did you navigate that moment of, what do you call it, like shock and it's a transition. It's like, how do you operate going forward? I know I watch my mom. I watch you too, but how do you define that, or how do you give advice to someone who might have gone through something like that?
I mean, everybody's different how they deal with things, but for me it was very simple. And Judi had passed it was like 2 weeks afterwards. I was back at work, and Mairin was back at college, so I was alone in the house. And I remember I would walk around the house and look at things that we had, and I would get upset and cry or do this or do that. And then finally, I remember it like it was yesterday. One night, I was whimpering around the house, looking at all her stuff, and I went, you know what, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do this. I've got 2 children. My daughter's in college. I got a demanding job. that I have to hold down. I have a life that I want to keep going. I'm not going to do this.
What do you mean this?
I'm not going to sit there and stare at the walls and cry.
Yes.
I'm not going to do that because that's what I was doing for the first few weeks afterwards. And I'm not going to do that. And I remember that, what happens, all your friends call you up for dinner, and I was telling them, nah, you don't have to do this. And then I said, you know what, I'm going to go to everyone who's, all her friends would call me up, come on over for dinner, our family dinners, and all my friends were doing that, invited me to play golf, let's do this, let's do that. And I wasn't doing any of it. I went, I'm going to do all of that, within the confines of my job and so on. So I started, I just said, I'm not going to sit in this house and look at the walls and cry. And I just started doing stuff. And I had my antique cars. I would play with my antique cars and work on them. And I just tried to stay busy. And then I met Barbara, my second wife, who you're good friends
Yeah, we met.
with her daughter. And I met Barbara. I mean, I knew Barbara. My son and my daughter, Mairin, and her son were boyfriend-girlfriend in 5th grade.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah, so, I mean, we knew Barbara. I had been to Barbara's house, and once in a while she'd have a dinner party, she'd invite Judi and I. So I kind of knew Barbara a little bit, and then we started dating, and I started dating Barbara. I remember it was difficult for my immediate family, and I started dating Barbara, I think, maybe 4 months after Judi died, 5 months. I didn't say anything wrong with it. I knew Judi wasn't coming back, and I wanted to keep my life moving. I wanted to keep my feet moving. So as soon as I started dating Barbara, and I realized there was something good going on there between the two of us, and she seemed to be interested, I called my kids up, and my mother-in-law, Judi's mom. And I said, listen, I want you to know I remember saying to my son, he knew, my daughter and my son both knew Barbara, because she was in town with us and so on. I remember calling my son up. I remember like it was yesterday. I said, I just want you to know, I've been seeing Mrs. Towers. And we go out to the movies. I don't want you to hear about it from somebody in town. And I remember him saying to me, well, you're going out with the classiest woman in town. But a few months later, he got in a period when he got upset, and I was upfront with you. I told you I was seeing her, and he said, that was the right thing for you to do, but the message was wrong. In other words, I wasn't ready for you to forget about Mom. And move on to another woman. I wasn't forgetting about Mom. I was just moving on. I was doing my thing. And my daughter, Mairin, she was more militant. She was openly angry. I told her, and she said, I'm not happy about this, but you're a big boy, you do what you want. And I went, that's what I have to do. And when I decided to marry Barbara a year later, I went to my kids again, and my daughter said, no, I don't want you to marry Barbara. And I waited 2 years until Mairin said, it's okay for you to marry Barbara. And then we got married. So it was not easy. And my mother-in-law, she was brutal. She would call me up and go, that woman's after you. And I went, listen, we're just going out, having fun, going to the movies, doing this, doing that. Relax. She was brutal. So,
it is an interesting, I know my brother's wife, his parents got divorced right before they were getting married. And I remember, it's hard to accept as the child. What would you advise? Let's say a listener's going, God, I'm in the same shoes.
Yeah.
I lost my wife, I lost my husband, and I want to move forward. Yet, I'm worried.
Yeah.
What advice would you give, the person in your shoes and your children? Because part of it is put yourself out and part of it is like getting out of your own head and being like, how would you like it to be alone? Like, there's loss for you too.
Yeah.
So like, what advice would you give someone in your shoes right now, who is fragile about those conversations? Be upfront.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. What would
I
you?
did it twice in my life, and then I did it with Barbara when Barbara was in a nursing home, and I started seeing Kathy. I went up to Barbara's children, did the same thing. Well, my advice is perfectly clear. Perfectly clear. When I went to my children and told them that right up front, I was ready to start seeing. I knew Judi wasn't coming back. You know, they have the mystical thing, but she wasn't coming back. I had a life to live, so I was going to live that life. And be honest with your children. I was upfront with them, and in the aftermath, after everything came out in the wash, 10 years later, I was someplace with both my kids. And you know what they said to me? We brought up the subject of, well, you know, that I know that was difficult for, after Mom died, for me to tell you about Barbara and to do this, do that. And my kids stopped me. They went, stop. And they went, you did everything exactly right.
Wow.
You did everything right. Both my kids said that. And I went, well, you didn't think it at the time. And they went, we didn't. But now we have the perspective of it. And you did everything right. So don't apologize for anything you did. So my advice to them would be, you're not going to do anybody any good if you're sitting in the house alone and unhappy. That's not going to do anybody. It's not going to do you good, not do your kids good. You're going to be a burden on them. Be active. Get out there. Get moving. Keep your feet moving. And just be honest and tell your kids. I don't want my kids hearing about this from somebody else.
I think that you said a great point. I think sometimes, you know, life happens. Sometimes surprises. You know, we lose somebody or you lose a job. And like, I really, and this goes back to going back to our conversation at the beginning of being a child and how this generation that's coming up is so hooked on these. We're not giving them the skill to move forward when things happen, or have the grit, or have the resilience. Like you have somewhere in your brain, you have chosen to be a participant in life, no matter what happens. That's what I see in you.
Yeah.
Like you're gonna meet someone, you're gonna go after your hobbies.
You're gonna buy a new car.
You're gonna get a new knee. You're gonna buy a new car. So freaking cool. Tell us more about because I think what I see also that I love about why I had you is your passion for hobbies and you're willing to try things. And if you look behind whoever's watching this on YouTube or whatever we show, this illustrations that you have behind you, it's all his Christmas cards that he's written since 77. Is that what I heard? And
75. This is the 50th.
Tell me how that came about, and like, what makes you excited to do it every year? Because I know I have my own tradition of what I do for my cards. But tell them about how you came about this idea and why doing that makes you so such a great yearly tradition for you.
Yeah, it's important to me.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's important to other people, but I wasn't an artist in high school. I never really had any innate talent. And after Judi and I married, I was walking down a street fair in Bayshore, and I saw, I don't know if you remember, an athlete called Al Order. For years, he had the most Olympic medals of any American. He was a discus thrower and a shot put thrower. And I happened to be walking down the street, and there was Al Order sitting there, and I went, oh my God, it's Al Order. And he goes, nobody knows who I am. And well, I know who you are. You were my hero. I used to watch the Olympics on TV, and you were there. His wife was an artist, and she was doing little pen and ink drawing. And today she has a huge foundation. You have to look her up, Order.
Cool.
And she did little sketches of squirrels and mice, little things. They were cute. I went, pen and ink. And I went, wow, I really like your work. And she said, try it. So I said, I'm not very artistic. try it. She handed me a couple of these boards, and she handed me a bottle of ink and a pen. She says, go home and try this. Find a picture and do it. And I did that. And I found, I could look at a picture and kind of do it on this thing. That's how I got started sketching. We were just married. We were living in an apartment. I had some time. And then when we were in California, and then I would sketch only occasionally, here and there, do a little thing. And then when I was in California, I decided, Christmas time, I was a trader on a trading desk. I would send my clients a Christmas greeting. So I did a sketch, very primitive. I actually have it up here. 1975, I did my first one. And I sent it out to some of my clients, broker clients. Maybe I sent out 20 of them. And everyone who got one called me up and said, that's fantastic. Thank you for taking the time to do that. We love that thing. I wrote a little message on the inside. It was very primitive. And then that's how I got started. And then the next year, I got serious about it. And I did the first one up there, my dog. That was 1975. 74 was the first one. And then I've done it every year since. And I just get, at first I just did family pictures of my kids, pictures of my wife, blah, blah, blah. And then later years, I did important people in my life, like Des McCarthy, the guy who brought me to Wall Street. And then I did Armstrong, the first man to step face on the earth, and Cappuccini, the actress, who I loved her as an actress. I did Walt Disney. I did JFK. I have them all up. I did Elvis this year. Yeah. Well, I did Elvis back in '78. I just issued it as a card this year. So I don't know. I got a lot of satisfaction out of it. And my Christmas card, now I send out 650 cards.
So funny.
And it takes like 3 days just to put the stamps on them. But I started.
It's so aligns. Again, like I write my card, it's different. I don't do the sketch. And you put your heart and soul. It's like when you write, he does the sketch, but then you're also writing about what went on in the year and the hit. Like right? Am I correct?
Yeah, the people who died. I used to do a history of the year, and then it just got too long. So now I do the famous people who died this year. Oh my God, he died this year? Yeah. So I have a list of all of them.
And then you write a little note, like whatever's happening.
And then I tell a story about whatever the subject matter is on the cover of the card. Like if it's about Elvis this year, or this year I wrote a little thing about Elvis's life, tragic life that he had. Yeah. So, and that's what I did for the magazine. When I used to write for the little Huntington Bay magazine, Stroll magazine, I wrote biography. I like biography. Anyway, you asked about the sketches. I get just a lot of satisfaction out of doing it, and trying to make it look as much like the person as possible. I'm sure a lot of people think it's stupid, but I do. I do it.
I totally value. Number one, I value it. It's like a whole nother level. Like I do more mindset, my journey, but I kind of connect it to like what I'm learning, and like this year was a little bit of Josie. But what I love about yours, it's kind of what Live Your June, it's kind of what you wrote this book. It's like you are honoring the moment in time, but also like taking in the people that have made impact in your life. And like gosh, you should, I hope one day you make a book of all this. Wouldn't it be cool to like have?
Yeah, some people have told me they want
it would be cool to have a book of this, because it's such history of every year and how you see the world and how you see that person you're writing about. It's so freaking cool. I just think it's like we don't honor enough about how we are fortunate to have this couch or whatever. Like, and you're honoring so many people. It's so beautiful. I love it. I have a few more questions. When you think of Steve, like you've done so many transitions in life and you handle it with such, I would say, class, and like you look smooth when you're going through hard times. What I've seen. It's not easy. Like Barbara was amazing, and then you kind of you had to go through this whole dementia thing, and you still go visit in the home, and you move forward, but like somewhere you're finding a way to mourn someone you've loved, Judi, Barbara's still here, but like, and then you have a new partner, and like still you are connected to you too. What defines, like if you give 3 words that make you, or your character, what makes you you? How would you, I know there's more than 3 words, but how would you describe, like 3 words or your personal philosophy of how you see you operating?
That's a good question. Perseverance,
Mm-hmm.
determination,
Mm-hmm.
recovery,
Mm.
recovery from, I think those would be the big things, and don't forget, and like Barbara's in a nursing home now. She doesn't obviously know who I am, other than the fact that she knows I'm somebody that she likes riding in the car, so I like taking her out. I'll put her in the car 1 or 2 days a week. We'll go out, we'll go to McDonald's, and then we'll go to Carvel. All terrible things, but when you think about it, it makes her happy. Who cares?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and Kathy understands it. When I first started seeing, when Barbara was in the nursing home in Oyster Bay, I went every afternoon at 3 o'clock. Every afternoon I went there and walked around with her. And then when COVID struck, it kind of stopped everything. Mm. And then after COVID, I realized I don't have to go every afternoon. I'll go 2 or 3 days a week or 4 days a week, whatever I can do. And I've done it. I've continued to do it. So when I walk in, even though she doesn't know I'm Steve, her husband, she stands up because she knows we're going to do something fun. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's just walking around the courtyard at Maryville. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we take her out in the car. Mm-hmm. And she's amazing because I will say to her sometimes, Barb, you want to go out in the car? And she'll go, yes. Mm-hmm. So her aide always says to me, there's still something going on in there. She doesn't do it all the time, but occasionally. If you hit her, maybe the synapses work. So, I think it's important to honor the past. And I don't mean that in a way that you should stop your life and just honor the past. You should move on with your life, but don't forget the past. Don't forget Barbara. And and people say to me, isn't it horrible that Barbara has this disease, you have to see her? And I went, actually it's not. It was horrible that Judi died right next to me in bed at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I didn't even have a chance to say a word to her. But now I get to see Barbara, and when I leave that nursing home, I feel great. I'm happy. I shared, I made her day a little bit better. And she made my day a little bit better. Because, Barbara's very, in spite of her illness, Barbara was blessed in her life with, whenever I think of Barbara, I think about the word dignity. Barbara had dignity. She lost her husband very young. Talk about losing her husband young. Raised her children. Was a great mother. Raised 3 fabulous kids. Yeah. And she always had dignity. And even now, in her illness, she still has dignity.
It's funny, I agree with that because I remember, when she was starting to, a little bit, there's this, she wants to prove. There's something fighter in her. Right.
And she never wanted people to feel sorry for her when she was sick. And she loved it, she loved her friends when they came to visit her, but she didn't want them to feel sorry for her. Let's go do something fun. Let's go to Hetcher Park and walk around. Let's go to the art museum. Let's, so, and she still has that same dignity. She carries herself, in spite of the fact that she has dementia and she's a shell mentally of what she was, she still has that dignity about her. It's kind of amazing. When I take her out in the car and she sits in a car, she loves riding in the car. And, she's looking around. Occasionally she'll look over at me and smile. Yeah. Cool. And she's 17 years into this disease. The longest person to ever live on record with her disease, which is a kind of Alzheimer's, is 19 years. So we'll see. Her doctor told me she could go on for another 20 years like this. She's very healthy. She's strong. She's very, that dignity that dignity that she has outwardly is also inward. She's strong. She could walk 10 miles tomorrow. She's not in a wheelchair, doesn't use a walker, doesn't use a cane, nothing.
True.
So
cool.
yeah,
She's hard, but it's such a hard moment, but it's, I don't know how to describe it. But how you're doing, she notices you and show up for her, and it's so beautiful.
Look at the cat, Josie.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
That's Kathy's outdoor cat, sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. All right, last couple more questions. What, probably with all the things you've drawn, who would you say is one of your biggest influencers, one of the biggest people that have made an impact in who you are today?
I mean, other than my parents, you mean outside people?
Yeah, whatever comes to mind.
Yeah, that guy up there, that guy Des McCarthy, I did his sketch. He's dead now, he died 3 years ago. But he's the guy that brought me to Wall Street. And he taught me a lot. He used to call me into his office when I was 16. And I would do something wrong. He'd be angry at me. I did something, because you're working in an office, it's a trading room. This is not the floor of the exchange. This is a Wall Street trading room up in a building. And you're in that, it's a little community. And as you work your way into it, you feel more comfortable. And my job would be to answer the phones. You know, these phones are just ringing all the time. And then you scream out to somebody, you know, there's a call for you. And then they'll say something in response to you, and then you'll come out with a wise ass comment. And then everybody will hear it. And then, you know, if the guy's acting like a jerk, they'll play. But then he would call me in after work and go, you don't do that. And he was angry. And he influenced me for the time I started Wall Street until I guess I left the firm, which was in 74. So he was a big influence on me. He was an outside person. I mean, we were all influenced by our parents.
Right.
And our sisters and brothers and grandparents. But he was an outside person who took a special interest in me, came to my parents, said, I want to bring your son down. He saw something in me that he thought would work well in his industry. And he came to my parents and said, I want to bring your son to Wall Street.
I mean, that's the other thing. I think also, like, someone seeing things in you that you don't see in yourself yet is pretty cool, and that's what I hear you.
Yeah.
You know, he saw something.
Yeah, he said, I don't know what it was. And I ended up having a career in Wall Street.
Yeah, so cool. What's the impact that you want to leave on the world when you think of, you know, if people go, Steve Porpora, he made that imprint on me. Like, what would you say, like, you would hope to leave the imprint on people that have been around you?
That's a good question.
You probably don't even think it, but you do.
I haven't thought about it, but you always think about what people say at your funeral.
Yeah, what do you think?
You know, I would like somebody to say that he led a happy life and he was adventuresome and you know, he was riding his motorcycle at 75 and then he went out and bought a slingshot at 77.
Slingshot!
And you know, he loved his antique cars and he enjoyed life, which I do. I tell you, I'm very happy right now.
Yeah.
So that's what I would like people to say. You know, he kept himself busy. He did his sketching. He wrote his book. He did this. He did that, and he left some things behind. He left some things. He left some things that we can hold behind. I think that's important.
Yeah.
So
I think that is important. I think part of like the mission of, and that's why I so resonate with you or am drawn to like learn more from you, is because you do the things that I want to inspire people to do, as in like live their passions. Life happens and how you move forward is so important, but also you're valuing the people that have made an impact on your life, whether you knew them or not. Like you're somebody inspired you, Elvis, whatever.
Right.
And I think I try and be more like myself, and I'm also trying to help the young value all the generations, because the way we operate, we're putting imprints on everybody all over the place.
Yeah.
So I love it.
Yeah.
Any last wisdoms? Any last favorite quote? Anything you want to share with the audience? Because we're going to share some of his cards, but this was a great interview, Steve.
That was great, thanks.
Thank
It
you
was
so
fun.
much.
It was fun.
It's fun.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you. And we'll link this book, and I haven't read it. I just ordered it, so now I'm going to read it. So
Good.
thanks, son. Appreciate it.
Good.